Hey guys, this is Allie. Today's video is stop motion basics. We're going to talk about resources. So I will give you a good rundown of films you should try to see, some studios that do stop motion animation, some books to teach you techniques and materials and all about the industry, some websites. So that includes like the websites that that you can get materials from. Also the Dragonframe website, which is the main software that most people use. We'll also look at some YouTube pages to follow and some Vimeo pages to follow of different artists that do stop motion work. I will also touch on software real quick. Dragonframe is really the preferred program that we use, but there's a couple other options that are free or low cost. And I will briefly go over the equipment that you need for a shoot to get all set up to start shooting stop motion, including the cheapest way to go about doing it. So first, I will be attaching a document to this video listing all of this information. So if you want to have it in list form, that's nice. So it's actually more updated than this image that you're seeing right here. But yeah, it lists a whole bunch of good stuff to check out. So let's start with films. Good films and TV shows and resources and things that are in stop motion. Good to know about these studios, good to know techniques, good to get that inspiration, seeing different materials and different styles and everything. So the first slide we've got here, stop motion films that are actually on Netflix currently as of like a week or so ago, this is May of 2019. So these were fairly recently. I saw them on Netflix. So Coraline is the first one that came out in 2009. It's by the Leica company, which is the company I would love to work for. I'll talk about Leica in a little bit. They're a US-based company in Portland, Oregon. So Coraline was a big deal of a movie, and I would definitely see it if you can. That was their first major solo project. They had worked on Corpse Bride a little bit, which I didn't realize until I rewatched Corpse Bride. But as them, Leica itself independently, as its own company, did Coraline first. There's also a Grand Night In, which is the story of Aardman. Aardman is the company in the UK that does a lot of claymation. So they've done things like Wallace and Gromit, Creature Comforts, Shaun the Sheep, all those little series. So they're pretty great to look into if you like working with clay. I'll also talk about clay in the materials section. Plasticine, which is what you use mostly for claymation. The Little Prince is a good film. That's really gorgeous. I think it's mostly 3D animation, but then it has little bits of stop motion here and there. I'm a fan of doing paper animation, doing stop motion with paper and fabric, so I really appreciate The Little Prince and the kind of aesthetic. So that's that picture up there with the little boy with the scarf. That is The Little Prince right there. So My Life as a Zucchini is a fairly recent film. It came out in 2016. It's from France. They finally now have an English dub, so you can listen to the audio in English. It's only about an hour long, but it's really gorgeous. The sets and characters and everything have a really distinct look to them, which is great. I would be very interested to know how heavy these heads are, just technique-wise, like how such a small body can really hold up a head that big. That must be pretty heavy. But anyway, the story is really cute, and I definitely check it out if you can. And then live action, this is actually a live action film, but it's kind of cool to check out anyway. It's by the Jim Henson Company. It came out in 1982, apparently. This thing's old. It's called The Dark Crystal. It's pretty ridiculous. The story itself is kind of crazy, but the puppets that they use are pretty cool. So these are obviously a different type of puppets than you'd use for stop motion. These are puppets that are, being moved while the camera's actually rolling, rather than moving a puppet a little bit, taking a picture, moving a puppet a little bit, taking a picture. So it's a different technique, but there's definitely some really cool aesthetic and stuff going on in The Dark Crystal, so check that out if you can. Other films that aren't on Netflix, Mary and Max used to be on Netflix, but now it's not anymore. So that came out in 2009, and that was by Adam Elliott, who's an artist who works out of Australia. He's done a whole series of films. Most times they're black and white. They use a lot of clay. I really like his sets. The story is really nice. The Mary and Max story has to do with a young girl who looks through a phone book and finds the address of a guy in New York City and writes him, and they become pen pals. It's a really cute story, and then also Adam Elliott does a lot of stories that are cute and funny, but they also have like kind of a sadness, a deep melancholy behind them too. There's some tragedy in them, which I really like. I really like his style. And my thesis film was somewhat inspired by Adam Elliott's work. So Mary Max is definitely one to check out. That's a feature film. A lot of Adam Elliott's work is short films. Harvey Crumpet is also by Adam Elliott. So these two pictures you have here, this is Mary and Max. That's Max as he's reading one of the letters from Mary, and then this is Mary's mother. So Adam Elliott uses really muted palettes, which is pretty nice actually. I really like it. I think if you tell me, oh, I'm going to make a stop motion film in black and white, I'd be like, I don't know. Really? Do you really want to do it in black and white when you can do it in full color? Why? But he really pulls it off, I think, really, really well. So, and the animation's great too. So Uncle is another one by Adam Elliott. That's a short film. Corpse Bride came out in 2005, and that, like I said, that actually was partially Leica. And it was also partially Henry Selick, who's a director who's done a number of different stop motion films. He's done Coraline, he's done, he's done Corpse Bride. I think he was involved, he was involved with James and the Giant Peach. I think he might have, I'm not sure if he was involved with The Nightmare Before Christmas or not. But excuse any background noise because I'm in the office at school trying to record audio for this. Anyway, Corpse Bride is a really gorgeous movie. That was also on Netflix at one point, but now it's been taken off. But yeah, really gorgeous work. Also muted palette, kind of a very blue and gray palette for the real world, and then part of it takes place in the oh Lord, this keeps happening. Adobe Flash Player. Where did I go? Here we are. Okay. So the part that takes place in the living world is very blue and gray, and then there's part of the story that takes place in the world of the undead, basically, and it's very colorful in that world, which is a nice contrast. But the puppets were amazing. If you can check out some behind the scenes on the puppets behind Corpse Bride, they have like a really involved structure to the heads, where like you can put a screwdriver in the back of the head and turn it, and it will make the mouth open in small increments, or just the way that they controlled the heads and on such a small scale was like unbelievable. So Corpse Bride's definitely a good one to check out. James and the Giant Peach came out in 1996, actually. It was a pretty long time ago, and that was stop motion. It is pretty gorgeous, and again, that's Henry Selick, so that's another U.S. Based production. Next, we've got Creature Comforts, which is by the Aardman Company. What do I have for the time period for that? I guess I don't have that written down. But that was a series, actually. A whole series of clips where they took audio of people talking and just, having normal conversations or whatever, and then they made puppets of different animals and set that to the audio. So they had a clip of like two old women talking about something, and they animated them as bats, like as in like old women bats. Yeah, it's really funny. So you should check out Creature Comforts. I think all of them, I think the entire thing is actually on YouTube for free. So definitely check out Creature Comforts. That's a fun concept anyway, to get audio of a conversation and then animate it as animals. Aardman also did Wallace and Gromit, the whole series of Wallace and Gromit movies. Well, maybe not a series, but yeah, a couple. There were a couple. Robot Chicken is done by Stupid Buddy Studios. That's a TV show that began in 2005 and is still running today. Is it on Adult Swim? Where is it on? Is it on Adult Swim? I forget what it's on, but it's a TV show by Stupid Buddy Studios, and so they do a lot of, they take a lot of existing puppets and dolls and things and put their own paper mouths on them and animate these existing dolls. So they have a very specific kind of look to their work, very exaggerated and almost slapsticky. So yeah, and they're also a really great studio to start out in terms of the industry. Once you get into the industry, I hear of a lot of people, even 2D animators, who started out at Stupid Buddy Studios. It's a good starting place for getting into the industry in general. And I will talk about they have a Vimeo page that's pretty good to check out. They have a boot camp, like an animation boot camp on that Vimeo page that you can pay for to rent it or whatever. And it's a really good little literal boot camp in stop motion animation, which is cool to check out. So I've done that. And then we've got The Nightmare Before Christmas, obviously. So this is Robot Chicken up here. I keep forgetting that I'm doing a screen recording. The Nightmare Before Christmas is one that pretty much everybody knows. That is stop motion. That was from 1993. Jeez. And it was Tim Burton. So yeah, that's a pretty classic one. Most people know that one. Pretty gorgeous. Precursor to Corpse Bride. And then of course you've got Chicken Run. So this guy, this is Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. And then Chicken Run, and there was a second Chicken Run movie too. That was also Aardman, again, in the UK. They do the plasticine claymation. Claymation's a type of stop motion. Not all of stop motion is claymation. But you can see that they have a very distinct shape to the mouths that they have, which I'm not a huge fan of, just personally. That's like just that aesthetic to me I don't like as much, but it's a very distinct kind of look, their eyes and their mouths and things. And they do very clean, very nice animation for working with, I guess, mostly plasticine. I think they mostly work with plasticine. It's tough to work with the clay, like a modeling clay, without getting your fingerprints all over it, and you know, there are some challenges with working with clay, but they obviously have really mastered it. Also check out Celebrity Deathmatch, was a TV show that was put out by MTV, and might be a little bit before many of your time. It was like, I was just old enough to see bits of it and understand what was happening. So that was also claymation. So they made claymation puppets. I think they used some foam latex too, but they made mostly claymation puppets of various celebrities, and basically had them fight. And so it was very, it was very graphic, but I mean, it's animation, so maybe it's not considered as graphic. There's a lot of like splattering and blood and smushing of faces and stuff. Claymation lends itself well to, you know, fight scenes where you can really squish faces and flatten people out and do a lot with claymation. So that ran from 1998 to 2007 on MTV, which is pretty great. Anomalisa is a feature film from 2015 by Charlie Kaufman. He's the director. I haven't seen the whole thing. I need to go back and watch it. But it was ultra realistic. The most realistic stop motion film I've ever seen. And one of the interesting choices, they've got replaceable face parts here. So probably they had two separate parts, like the forehead, and they probably had this bottom part here, and they were able to switch out maybe a different forehead with eyebrows that were raised, and maybe a different jaw, which has his mouth wide open or something. You're able to switch out. It's called replacement animation. You're switching out you have different copies of that jaw with different expressions on, basically. And most movies, when they do that, they will go in, like for Coraline, the Leica company, they had the two-part replaceable faces. A lot of their films, I think, are all two-part replaceable faces, many of which were 3D printed. But a lot of companies will go back in and they'll paint out this little seam here, but they chose to leave it in Anomalisa, which is an interesting choice. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but maybe they didn't have many digital painters, or maybe they just didn't mind there being that seam there. I'm sure certainly once you get through the first couple minutes of the film, you kind of stop seeing it. You kind of stop paying attention to it. But yeah, that's interesting. So I got to look more into how that film was made, also, like what they've got going on with all the different materials and everything. It was very live actiony. It was as live actiony of a stop motion that I think I've seen. So yeah, I got to check that out some more. It's kind of hard to find online. Tim Burton did a number of different films. So he did Frankenweenie, which came out in 2012, which I haven't seen, but that's in combination with Disney. So I should check that out. Vincent is a short film that I have seen. This shot is from Frankenweenie also. That's great. That is outstanding character design, really. That is awesome. Again, someone choosing to do stop motion in black and white. Very interesting. So Vincent was a short film that came out in 1982 that was also by Tim Burton. You almost want to think that it's made for kids because the whole thing is very like, it's like a poem that rhymes. So it almost seems like it's for kids, but not necessarily. One of the things with animation in general is we're fighting this idea that animation is for kids. It's not always just for kids. Sometimes it is, but there's animation for adults too. So anyway, that's a thing for the whole world of animation. It's difficult to fight against that idea that animation is for kids. You know, even being an animator, people are like, oh, so you make work for kids. You do stuff for Sesame Street. It's like, no, I make actual films like Anomalisa or Coraline or whatever. But yeah, anyway. So Vincent's a short film, and he talks about this kid named, I guess his name is Vincent, and he's obsessed with Vincent Price. He wants to be Vincent Price. That's another reference that might be a little too old for some of you guys, but it makes me think of Bill Hader's impressions of Vincent Price on SNL. Oh my God, I'm not old enough to have really experienced Vincent Price himself, but the impressions I still find so hilarious. Okay, and so, anyway, I'm trying not to curse because I feel like this channel should be PG, but it's going to be very difficult for me to do that. Next, we've got the Eagleman Stag, which you should definitely check out. That's online, free. I forget where, just look it up on Google. But that entire film was done with foam, just white foam. The kind of foam you get when you buy raw meat at the store, that white foam tray, it's basically that type of foam that they used. And so the director was Mikey Please. I don't know if he did the entire film by himself, because he wasn't part of a company. But anyway, that was a film that came out in 2012. It's a short film, The Eagleman Stag, and it's pretty ridiculous too. The whole story and like the voiceover is just, it's great. It's awesome. Okay, good. The phone stopped ringing. It was probably a spam call anyway. Just because I'm in the office doesn't mean I have to work. No. I am working-ish. Anyway, The Eagleman Stag, definitely check out. It's friggin' hilarious, and the animation is very good. They did they did the eyes and the mouth afterward in 2D after they had filmed the rest of the action itself. But yeah, so it's really interesting, and definitely very fun of a short film to watch. It's maybe like 9 minutes, something like that. Madame Tootly Pootly is gorgeous. It came out in 2008, and the main director was, I'm not gonna even try to pronounce that. You can try to pronounce that yourself. And Chris Lavis. And so one of the things with Madame Tootly Pootly, this is available on Amazon Prime. There are a number of different short films, stop motion short films that are available on Amazon Prime to check out if you can. But yeah, so this one is like, it's unsettling how realistic it is, and you can't figure out at first what it is that's so unsettling until you realize that the eyes have been composited. So basically they animated the whole puppet without eyes, and then afterward they composited like actual human eyes, like they had an actor make the eye expressions, and then they composite that onto the puppet itself. And so you've got these hyper realistic eyes. I mean, they are realistic because they're real eyes. And you get so much, like, she doesn't speak at any point during the short film. Short film, I think, by the way, is like 13 minutes, something like that. But she doesn't speak at all during the short film, and her face remains pretty much the same expression. It's her eyes that you really get most of the expression from, which is great because they're, you know, basically live action eyes. But you can see the aesthetic here is just gorgeous. Obviously the detail, just, oof, wonderful. And it was also, a large part of it takes place in a train car. So you've got some sets that are like really tight. I don't know, like to try to get a camera in there, you've got to have set parts that come out so you can fit the camera in. That had to have been really a technical challenge to shoot that. So yeah, check out Madame Tootly Pootly. I think it's available free online. If you don't have Amazon Prime, check it out if you can. So we also have short films by Pez. So Pez is like a short version of his last name. I think his last name's like Pescatore or something like that. So he's an animator. He animates objects mostly. He doesn't like make actual puppets and move the puppets around. He just animates objects for the most part. So he's an Academy Award nominee for Best Animated Short Film. So he does a lot of things like he's making spaghetti, except he's making it with rubber bands and yarn, and the wine is a bunch of ribbon, and the salt and pepper shakers are chess pieces. Or he makes guacamole out of these avocados that are also grenades, but also billiard balls. And then he chops up, I don't know what he chops up, but it's actually dice. And then the chip that he dips into the guacamole is a poker chip. So he does a lot of, like, I want to call it cute, but like that comes off as condescending. But he does a lot of clever object animation, basically. And so he's US based and has been making these films since 2008. So that's good to see, a different type of animation, you know, not puppet based. And then of course we have the Rankin Bass productions. So these are these old school Christmas films that they play every year around Christmas. These are stop motion, and they are from the 1960s, 1970s, something like that. And they're gorgeous, obviously, and they're classic at this point. So you can see those around Christmas every time. I'm not sure if they're available online, but you've got the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer film. There's a couple of them. But yeah, those were stop motion. And it's great to see stop motion from the 1960s or 1970s still on TV. That's pretty awesome. Okay, we're getting to the end of some of the films here. So Will Vinton was a animator who did stop motion back in the 70s. I'll talk about him in the claymation sort of episode, because he did a lot of claymation work, particularly on faces. It's fun with claymation. You can sculpt a face, so each frame by frame, you're moving the eyebrows a little bit, you're deforming the cheeks, you're opening the mouth in different ways. You can get really intricate and really expressive with clay in ways that you might not be able to with a different puppet that has like a hard head. So he was behind the California Raisins, which is another reference that is maybe a little too old for my generation. I knew of them. I don't think I ever saw them on TV, and I knew that my sister had like bed sheets that had the California Raisins on them. But so they were I don't even know, were they advertising raisins? I don't know, but they sang, and they were claymation, and they whatever. Okay. But Will Vinton will see closed on Mondays, some of his films. So that's back from the 70s, which is nice. And then Mr. Bill, you should definitely know about. This was a series that ran on SNL, Saturday Night Live, in the 70s. I saw some of it as a kid. So basically, it's like really rudimentary stop motion animation. So these were a series of TV shorts that were aired on SNL. So it was really rudimentary animation, and every episode, Mr. Bill dies in some horrible way. And Mr. Bill's tagline is, "Oh no!" So definitely try to look him up if you can. It's pretty funny. Like he's just walking along outside, he gets run over by a truck or something. Oh no! So that's fun. So broken down by directors to watch out for. So Aardman and Nick Park. So Nick Park's the guy behind Aardman. Like I said, Aardman's the company in the UK that's doing a lot of claymation. They've done Chicken Run, Wallace and Gromit, Flushed Away, Shaun the Sheep, Farmageddon, and Chicken Run 2. So again, they have a very distinct style. Like I said, that mouth is very similar in the eyes that they kind of go for. So yeah, so we'll also talk about them during the plasticine little episode that I'm going to talk about, because plasticine is an oil-based clay it's a modeling clay that never dries out, and so that's really one of the best options for doing claymation, stop motion, and that's often what they use a lot. So we'll talk about that in the materials section. Yeah, Aardman's pretty great. Wes Anderson, yeah, let's get hipster. So Wes Anderson is obviously a live-action director, but he's got a thing for stop motion, which is great. We need more people who have a thing for stop motion, because we need to keep it alive. So in 2009, he was behind Fantastic Mr. Fox, and recently, in 2018, he was behind Isle of Dogs. So, was Fantastic Mr. Fox based on an existing story? I think it was based on an existing story. Isle of Dogs, I'm not so sure. But one of the interesting things with him is there's a concept in stop motion where you talk about boiling. So if your puppet has a lot of hair or something, every time you touch the puppet to move it, that hair is going to move a little bit. And so when you play the animation back, the hair is just kind of like moving all over the place, and it can be distracting when you're trying to pay attention to like lip sync or eye movements or whatever. The hair kind of moving all over the place can be distracting. Some people don't mind it. It's referred to as boiling. There's a number of different words for it, but boiling, yeah, it looks like the fur is kind of boiling. But anyway, Wes Anderson was aware of that, but didn't care, or he liked it, or he just didn't mind. So if you watch any of those films, you'll see a lot of boiling. So the fur is kind of moving around a bit as the animators touch the puppet, take a picture, touch the puppet, take a picture. So that's generally something that a lot of stop motion animators try to avoid. So you would avoid making a puppet that has a lot of hair, or if it does have hair, you would mix glue or something with it, make it hard so that it's not able to move as much. But yeah, so there are options for making puppets that don't have movable hair. You can also flock puppets, which is attaching like very small fibers, so that it's kind of like the inside of a music box. That's what flocking is like. So it's very small fibers. That was a custodian. Very small fibers. So you're making an object look fuzzy, but you're not having the hair that can kind of get moved around all over the place. So yeah, Wes Anderson is US based, and they've done some awesome work. Definitely check out behind the scenes stuff for his movies. I've seen Fantastic Mr. Fox. I haven't seen Isle of Dogs yet, so I definitely have to check that out. There's a lot of behind the scenes awesome stuff for Isle of Dogs that I've seen. Just their puppets are gorgeous. So yeah, Tim Burton is another big heavy hitter in the industry. So we've got that Vincent movie I talked about, Frankenweenie, James and the Giant Peach down here, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Corpse Bride. So you can see that he has a very clear aesthetic going on here, which is it's kind of cool to put together all of a director's work and take a look at, you know, similarities and how they've changed over time, how their style has changed over time. So yeah, Tim Burton's awesome. I think there's a bar in New York City that's Tim Burton themed. I think it's New York City. Check that out. Henry Selick, he overlaps with Tim Burton a bit because they've kind of worked together. So James and the Giant Peach, like I mentioned again, before Coraline and Corpse Bride. Leica is, I don't know, a lot of people that are into stop motion are like, oh my god, I want to work for Leica. Leica is named after the first dog in space, which was named Leica. And so they do stop motion primarily. They've been using more and more 3D over time, which makes me a little sad. But they do a lot of 3D printing too. So they'll model something on the computer, make an object on the computer, and then be able to actually print it out and hold it in their hands. It's pretty cool. We might talk about 3D printing in one of the other videos here. But they've been doing a lot of 3D printing, especially for face parts, because they do replaceable face parts. So like I said about the Anomalisa, you know, all of these faces, they had a little seam here that runs along here that was painted out frame by frame by some digital artists. So yeah, so definitely check out some behind the scenes stuff about that. You can see that each character actually had like 3,000 face pieces or whatever, however it worked out. And they have people that work for Leica that are librarians. They're face replacement librarians. So they keep track of all the different face pieces and pick out the ones that the animator's going to need for the portion of the film that animator's going to shoot. So yeah, Leica's U.S. based. They're just outside of Portland, Oregon. And also the head of Leica is the heir to the Nike throne, as in the Nike shoes in sports company. So that's partly how they. So I think that's partly some of the funding behind them. And thank God for him. His name's Travis Knight. Thank God for him, again, for helping to keep the stop motion world and industry alive. So yeah, so Leica put out Corpse Bride. They worked on Corpse Bride with Tim Burton in 2005. And then Coraline was the first one they put out like on their own, followed by Paranorman. My current favorite of theirs is Paranorman. It used to be Coraline, but Paranorman really kind of came up and took the trophy on that one. Box Trolls was in 2014. Kubo and the Two Strings, which you've probably heard of more, was in 2016. That, I think, is still on Netflix. or maybe or it was, and maybe it isn't now. It was on Netflix for a while. They don't market that widely, which I think is part of the problem with their movies not getting as much marketing. Kubo got the most, it seemed like, so a lot of people saw Kubo. And then The Missing Link is the one that they have out right now. It's actually in theaters right now. It's May 21st, 2019, and Missing Link is out right now. I think I heard something about them, like they had told 4 stories where their main character was a child, and so they decided that they wanted to tell a story where the main character is an adult. And so the idea with Coraline is like it's a girl who moves into a new house, and there's like a little passageway that she crawls through, and she gets into a different world, which seems better than the world that she was in before. There's some really awesome characters and effects in there. But then the brand new world kind of takes a turn for the worst, and she has to kind of fight back. Paranorman, good lord, the custodians. Paranorman is about a boy that sees dead people, which is a familiar story, I guess. And then some zombies come back to life, and there's a curse that he has to fight against. It's pretty awesome, and the technical challenges that they conquered were amazing. The Box Trolls is about a sort of a group of little yeah, thanks for the email. The Box Trolls is about a group of monsters that live in boxes underneath the streets, and they kind of end up adopting this little boy, and then there's just a whole thing. It's my least favorite of Laika's work, but again, technical challenges, it's amazing. Yeah, Kubo and the Truth. Yeah, anyway, I don't have to give you a summary of everything, but The Missing Link is about what's the word? Not the Abominable Snowman. Bigfoot? Yeah, like a Sasquatch, yeah. And he's looking for the rest of his species, kind of. It seems fun, so I'm gonna check that out, definitely. Older school directors and animators, just to recap a little bit, the Rankin Bass Productions, those are those old school Christmas films. Will Vinton, who did the claymation, the Mr. Bill series, and then Ray Harryhausen, I haven't talked about yet, but he was one of the first stop motion animators, and he did like the original King Kong movie, which was awesome, and he did, this was from Jason and the Argonauts, and the way that they did it, so this was back in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, something like that. So the way that they did King Kong is they filmed the set basically with a mask, and then they would project that from behind onto a screen, and then they'd project the video of an animated puppet from the front, and then videotape those two basically composited together. That doesn't make any sense, but it's a crazy way of trying to composite a stop motion animated puppet into a live action film before, we had computers and compositing software and green screens. So that's pretty cool. So you can check out that stuff. There's also Jan Svankmajer, who was, what is he? Where is he from? Is he Danish or something? I forget. But he's done some pretty creepy stuff, but still pretty seminal stop motion work. A lot of plasticine stuff. Stop motion kind of lends itself to creepiness and creepy stories and creepy objects. So, yeah, so he's done a lot of work there. If you're really serious about stop motion, you should check him out too. Continuing with older school directors and animators, there's Industrial Light and Magic, which started out first in the 1970s and 1980s in the US. They did a lot of the special effects for Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So those, the AT-ATs or whatever they are from that, sorry, Star Wars fans, from that one Star Wars movie, those are actually stop motion animated and then composited into the live action footage. So, and I believe this guy right here is Phil Tippett. So he worked with Industrial Light and Magic on those Star Wars movies and a couple other different things. So here he is animating one of those walking AT-AT things. This is called a surface gauge, which is one of the things that they used to use to help track movement since they didn't have, obviously, Dragonframe and the kind of software that we have to work with today. Industrial Light and Magic is still around, and they've been doing still some industry revolutionary stuff. So they worked on Avatar here, so they've done like a motion capture and then like adding an animation on top of a motion capture of someone's face. They've worked on a lot of the different Marvel movies. They've animated, they did a really great job on one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They've got this guy with these tentacles on his face. There's a whole video where some visual artists talk about how awesome of a job they did with that, how each individual tentacle like was its own thing, like they didn't move together the way that hair would. They moved independent of one another, and like the musculature, like it was just really well done. That's my phone. Everything is interrupting me. So ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, they're still around, and they're still doing a lot of really awesome stuff. Pretty much every Marvel movie you will see Industrial Light and Magic credited in the end. There's also a live action director named Michel Gondry. He's French. So it's all live action work, but he does a lot of compositing of stop motion in there, and there's a lot of kind of a stop motion aesthetic, a lot of handmade aesthetic kind of stuff. So he did the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind movie. Science of Sleep is my favorite. I love Science of Sleep. That's what these 3 images are from. So there's a lot of just like practical effects, which are effects that are done in front of the camera rather than afterward with a computer. Yeah, just the aesthetic and the work that he does is really, really awesome. So I would especially check out Science of Sleep if you can. Be Kind, Rewind was another movie that he did with Jack Black, where they owned a video rental store, and something happened with a magnet, and all of the videos got erased. And so they decided that they were going to reshoot all of these different movies, like Ghostbusters and a bunch of different things, but they did it super low tech with like cardboard and stuff. It's a pretty great premise and cool effects in that video. Michel Gondry also did a bunch of music videos. So here's the White Strokes. Was it the Strokes? Yeah, he did a bunch of different music videos. So he did this Lego one. There's also a YouTube video called A Closer Look at Michel Gondry's Aesthetic on YouTube. So check that out if you can. So again, this is all live action work, but there's some bits of stop motion here and there, and even the live action work has some like handmade practical effects. So he's a cool person to check out. Studios to know about in the stop motion industry. So we've got Aardman, like I said, in UK. Cup of Coffee is in Toronto. There's actually a pretty lively animation scene in Canada. There's also the Sheridan College of Art and Design up in Canada. That's a pretty renowned animation school. It was suggested that I go. I contacted Leica and asked them what I had to do to work for them, and they gave me a list of 5 schools, and one of them was RIT, which is where I did go, and one of them was Ringling in Florida, Sheridan in Canada, CalArts, and SCAD, which is Savannah College of Art and Design. But yeah, there's a good industry for stop motion up in Canada. Bixpix is in California. They're pretty much dedicated to stop motion. Some of these other studios aren't stop motion specifically, but they do some stop motion. Prologue Films I don't know much about. The Kyoto brothers, they're 3 brothers that do stop motion. They did a sort of tutorial on stop motion in general on the Stan Winston School for the Character Arts website, where you can pay for a subscription and watch a bunch of videos on making monster masks and sculptures and all kinds of stuff. So they did, they're pretty active in the stop motion scene. They're located in LA. And so they did a little tutorial on Stan Winston. I'm sure they have some other stuff online as well. Shadow Machine is an animation company. I think they do mostly 2D, but they also do some stop motion. Screen Novelties, the same thing. These are all California based. Stupid Buddy Studios. Actually, I misspelled that because it's supposed to be double O's instead of the U. Stupid Buddy Studios is also located in California, and like I said, they do Robot Chicken, things like that. Bent Images, I don't know a whole lot about. Leica is in Hillsboro, Oregon, so they're just outside Portland, like I said. And then these guys, there are 2 here in Rochester that do some stop motion. Hornet, yeah, is in New York City. So yeah, some stop motion studios to look into if you're looking for a job in the industry. books to check out. There are two of them that are really helpful for getting into stop motion. There's Stop Motion Craft Skills for Model Animation. This is the version that I have, this like red pink one. That's the version that I have. The newest version is this 3rd edition here. So it's only like, yeah, 35 is kind of a lot, but it's a good book though, because it talks about craft skills. So it's going to show you how to make puppets and how to fabricate this and that to actually do it. It's going to talk about some techniques, stuff like that. So that's a really helpful book that I found to be helpful. And then the second book is The Advanced Art of Stop Motion Animation. So this one has a little screenshot of Coraline on it. It has a really good history of stop motion in it, if you're interested in history type stuff. It's only about $21, I guess. Yeah. So this one has less fabrication information, less technique information, and more interviews and talking about films that already exist, kind of thing, but it's still a pretty good book. Mostly I would definitely recommend the Craft Skills for Model Animation book, but I'm biased because I'm a fabricator. Websites. So I mentioned Stan Winston School of Character Arts. So this is stanwinstonschool.com. So you pay for a subscription. I think it's like $50 a month, something like that. And then you can watch all these tutorials and all these videos about puppet making and mask making and special effects makeup and sculpting and how to do stop motion and all these different kind of things, working with latex and foam latex and silicone and, you know, all these different things. So that's a pretty cool website to follow up on. They have a couple free things, I think, too. And you get the free 7-day trial. But yeah, so that's stanwinstonschool.com. So it's a lot of sculpture, special effects, and some stop motion information. Short of the Week is not specifically for stop motion, but they post a lot of stop motion videos. Pretty good curated page of short films. Monster Makers is a good place for materials. So they have a lot of like different types of latex foam, silicone. If you're going to try to make monster masks or do sculptures of monsters, or you need special effects supplies for doing special effects and makeup. If you're casting things, if you're trying to paint onto latex, all that kind of stuff, you can get from Monster Makers, which is monstermakers.com. Here's some mask making latex. So yeah, so they're a great company for doing all kinds of special effects, gross monster stuff. Smooth On is a company you should definitely know about if you do stop motion. So they have all the kind of things that you need for making a mold and for casting into a mold. So they've got, in the next frame up, we'll look at everything that they have. One of the things about this is, like, at least last time I checked, you can't actually buy anything from the website. You have to find a distributor and buy through them, which is weird and kind of annoying. But, you know, so Smooth On is the company, and so they make all kinds of different materials that you might use for all kinds of different things, mostly mold making. So let's take a look here. We've got silicone rubber, tin cure versus platinum cure. That's just like a slight difference in the chemical process, basically. If you're going to be casting a puppet in silicone, you want to go with the platinum cure. So remember that. You're going to do silicone rubber, dragon skin is the type of silicone that I'll talk about using for a puppet, which is clear. You can color it. It's just really good. It has some nice elasticity to it. It's really good for puppets, except it can get very heavy. So we'll talk about silicone puppets and casting silicone puppets, but platinum cure is the type that you really want to go for. I forget exactly like what makes platinum better than tin, but we'll talk about that in the silicone video. I'll re-up my knowledge on that. Urethane rubber, so that's just a different type of rubber you might use for certain cases. Epoxy casting, so epoxy is sort of like a plastic. It usually comes in two parts. Resin is also sort of like a plastic. Natural resins come from trees, but we have a lot of synthetic resins nowadays. So that's for casting like hard things. Urethane resins, so they're just a little bit different of a resin. Epoxy putties are clays that can that often have two parts, and they mix together and harden pretty fast. So they're good for certain techniques. Expanding foams, all kinds of foams where you mix them together and they expand really big, and then you can make, you know, cinder blocks for a live action film that are like super They look like cinder blocks, but they're actually super light because they're made of foam. Epoxy and urethane coatings, all kinds of different things. Life casting materials, that's always really fun. If you want to make casts of somebody's face or hands or body, a lot of times you'll use alginate. Some of these, yeah, the alginate I've used is purple. So that's a safe material for casting a body. But so you can get all that kind of stuff there. Adhesives for various things, skin safe FX materials, obviously, colorants and fillers to use for different resins and different silicones, and you know, you have to have special colors to dye certain materials, basically. Sealing and release agents. Release agents, you're talking about mold making. When you're trying to pull a cast out of a mold, you want to make sure that it comes out well. It's kind of like greasing a pan before you try to bake a cake, basically. Sealing would be just putting like a coating on top of something or a mold to seal it and to keep moisture out, to do like a gloss coat on something. Concrete and gypsum modifiers. Tools and equipment, so you've got hairbrushes and chip brushes and mixers and all that kind of stuff. Accessories for mixing things together, and I guess they do seminars, which is fun. YouTube pages to follow. I recently stumbled upon Luke Towan. I guess that's how you pronounce it. He has a bunch of tutorials on making ultra realistic dioramas, modeling tutorials. So a lot of his stuff is for maybe for model train setups, but certainly applicable to stop motion. So these are just super realistic miniatures and showing how you can make them. I think a lot of the materials he uses are like super expensive, like fancy materials, which might not be good if you have a really low budget, but definitely educational. So follow him if you can. Jeff Lafferty does a whole bunch of different types of art stuff. He does like drawing and all kinds of different mediums, but he does stop motion as well, and his puppets and things are pretty well made. He's a pretty decent, well, he's better than decent fabricator. So he has a very monotone voice, and he does not seem super excited about anything, but he's definitely a good person to follow. A lot of tutorials on different materials and things. This is Michael Parks. So he does a lot of claymation work. So he has some tutorials on animating mouths and animating eyes on clay objects. Here's an armature that he's built. Lip sync, animating to music, so green screen effects. Yeah, so he's got a bunch of tutorials on YouTube as well. These are all YouTube accounts that you can follow. And this account, I'll probably make sure that this account is subscribed to a bunch of different YouTubes as well, so you can just kind of leech off of my list of things to watch. So we're looking at Stop Mo Nick on YouTube. He's a great guy to follow. He has a lot of really good tutorials on all kinds of different heads, latex heads, build-up puppet heads, different types of silicone, different clays and things, and how they work, making mouths that open. It's pretty rough style, but it's pretty nice though at the same time. Yeah, so he's using epoxy sculpt, which we'll talk about. His tutorials are really fast, so you have to like play them slower to try to catch everything. But yeah, he works with a lot of latex, which I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of latex. It's like an easier alternative to silicone. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, pretty fun. And then he has making a build-up puppet techniques. So a lot of those things I'll talk about too. Okay. And then finally, Cranbrecher's Guide is also a really good YouTube to follow. He does a lot of tutorials on stop motion. He does some really excellent animation. His characters have some really good acting. His style, his puppets are pretty simple, and parts of how he makes them make me cringe a little bit. But we'll take a look. So take a look at some of his stuff. He uses a lot of felt, a lot of yarn. It's good stuff to watch, though. Vimeo pages to follow. We've got Stupid Buddy Studios. So they are out in, did I say LA? They're out in LA. Yeah, they do Robot Chicken. So this is the animation camp that I talked about. So you can rent it for $79 or buy it for $100. And so it's like a 2-hour animation boot camp, which is well done. So I've seen it. It's pretty good. Okay, let's talk about stop motion software. So the main software that I would suggest is Dragonframe. That's what's used, that's the most professional, that's what's used in the industry, that's what was used to make all kinds of movies like Shaun the Sheep, Kubo and the Two Strings, all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about Dragonframe. I will talk about it a lot because that's pretty much all that I've used. Yeah, so Dragonframe itself, the best things about Dragonframe, you've got live view and digital and video assist. So you can see what the camera is currently looking at in addition to the images that you already took with the camera. You can capture photos, you can organize, and you can do things in high resolution. It is a frame grabber program, so you can actually capture the images with, you can control the camera from the computer and capture the images as you animate. One of the biggest things that you want to have in a program is onion skinning, which is really important. So onion skinning lets you see the picture you just took superimposed over what you're currently looking at. And so you can kind of plan out your motion this way. You can see where this arm was a frame ago so that you know where to move it in this frame. So onion skinning is a big deal. And Dragonframe has that. They also have an animation window, a cinematography window, and a audio window. So there are 3 different windows that you can go to. You can do all kinds of changes in the cinematography window. In the audio window, you can bring in dialogue, you can bring in music, you can bring whatever, and it'll automatically set it up to your frame rate that you want. You can also do different camera moves in Dragonframe. There's some motion capture capabilities. Dragonframe is really great, and I'm not even aware of all of the things that it can totally do. But, okay, so this is the Dragonframe stop motion animation software website. So here we've got the essential stop motion interface, creating a film you've been dreaming up. So Dragonframe Basics, they've got a video here. This is pretty new in terms of the website. Like, there are very few Dragonframe tutorials online, or at least there have been, and that's part of why I wanted to do videos about it, because it is used by a good amount of people, and in the industry there ought to be more tutorials. There's a whole bunch of stop motion, there's a whole bunch of features and capabilities in Dragonframe that I wasn't even aware of and had to learn the hard way. So there needs to be more tutorials. So it's good that they're starting to have those on the website. So here we've got Dragonframe features. Let's check out. So you've got your animation window, your cinematography window, your audio window. DMX lighting, I'm not sure a whole lot about. So you can program animated lighting with simple keyframes, automate work lights, which is interesting. And then there's some motion control options. It can help you to make camera moves if you have like a rig for your camera to move along. Keep back controls, timeline, drawing tools. You've got an X sheet that you can put notes and things in, guide layers that help you line things up, live view magnification so you can check things like focus, camera controls, composition guides, image reviews. Yeah, so you can just look at the live frame of what your camera is currently looking at in front of you and adjust focus and adjust all kinds of different things. Movie recording, stereoscopic, multi-track editing. You can do some light editing of your audio track to help you along if you're doing some like lip sync or something like that. Custom face sets. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that I'm not even totally aware of and able to use yet. So yeah, program complex camera moves and an intuitive interface. So all kinds of, there's a little frame of the Little Prince there, which I suppose was done on Dragonframe. There's all kinds of extra little equipment pieces that you can work with here. And there's what's new in Dragonframe 4. So there's Linux support, improved camera support, guide layers. You can bring in reference video into the actual program, which is nice. Multiple drawing layers, focus check is good, color palettes, movie recording, multiple audio clips. Yeah, so there's a ton of stuff and capabilities in Dragonframe. So let's go back to the main part of the site, camera options. So understanding how Dragonframe uses your camera. So with the standard setup, you have your camera set up, you have your set in front of the camera, you have the camera turned on. It's attached to your computer via a USB cable, that's where the data goes across, and then the camera itself is either on a battery or on an AC adapter. I suggest an AC adapter because it's annoying to try to get your camera off the tripod to change the battery, and then when you go back to shooting, your camera's moved. Definitely use an AC adapter if you can. So it's connected to the computer, and you can control the camera from the computer. You can control things like f-stop, you can control shutter speed, you can control white balance, the length of shutter speed, all kinds of different things. And you can actually take the pictures from the computer, so you don't even have to physically touch your camera at all, which is good because you don't want to move the camera. And so there's a list on the Dragonframe website that has all the different cameras that the program supports. Most people who do stop motion will work with a Canon camera. So the EOS series, pretty much every camera from the EOS series is here and supported by Dragonframe. So I got a camera like second hand for like $200 on eBay or whatever, and so I got the Canon EOS Rebel T2i. A lot of the stop motion studios here at school have like a T3i, and then a higher quality of that. Yeah, the Rebel series is pretty good if you want to stay in the T2i, T3i. Those are pretty good. And I mean, sometimes like you can get a nicer camera, but if it's taking the same resolution photo, then what really is the difference, So I mean, if you go with like a Rebel 2 Ti, you can just pay a lot less and get the same quality footage. Higher quality than the Rebel series would be the 40D, the 50D, 60D, all those guys. But yeah, so all these Canon cameras are supported by the software. So if you have a camera that is not supported, that just means that you can't have your camera on and connect it up to the program and use manipulate your camera via the program. You'll have to just get a different camera or shoot somehow on your own with the camera, and then maybe you can import the images into Dragonframe. Like I said, you can go on eBay. You can get some of these cameras for as cheap as like $60. They may or may not come with lenses, but like $60 is not bad. So some people use Nikon's. DSLR is a digital single lens refraction, I believe. Sometimes I forget that little detail, and it doesn't matter anyway. Digital single lens reflex camera. Yeah, that's what it stands for. But that's the type of camera you use for stop motion. It's a DSLR camera. So some people work with Nikon cameras, which are an option. Of course, some of these over here say no live view, so those cameras don't allow you to see what the camera is currently looking at. So those you'd have some limited capabilities with. But most people go for Canon cameras. So I would recommend that. I will also talk about the fact that ideally you want to use a Canon camera with a Nikon lens. Canon lenses have a tendency to create a flicker in the final image sequence. There's a shutter thing with a Canon lens that's like automated, and so it doesn't always make the same measurement or make the same movement every time. There might be slight variations in how it closes or whatever. I have to look it up again, exactly what it is. But a Nikon lens is completely manual, so you don't get a flicker, basically. You can get away with using a Canon lens, I'm sure. But if you're pretty serious about stop motion, you want to make like a really nice student film, you might as well get a Nikon lens. So what I did is I got a cheap Canon camera that was like $200, and I got a Nikon lens for it that was also probably like under 100, something like that. And then you just have to get a converter that attaches a Nikon lens to a Canon camera, and that's like $15. But anyway, so those are all the cameras that Dragonframe supports. Setup and troubleshooting, obviously. The blog, I don't know. You don't. It doesn't matter. Tutorials. You've got a bunch of different tutorials here, which is great. Here's within your animation workspace, your cinematography workspace, audio, and then all your other. It looks like, yeah, see, coming soon for some of these tutorials. So they must have just started uploading these tutorials. So yeah, so it's good that you can finally get those on the website. So let's look at products. So Dragonframe software, let's go through here. There's a student version and then there's a full version. I managed to buy the full version. I guess I just bypassed the student version entirely. That would be listed in here somewhere. So basically you get the software, which is just a box and a serial code. As of the last time that I got it, I got Dragonframe 3. You just get the serial code. You download the program from the actual website, and then you just put in your serial code number, and then you've got the program. But it comes with a controller, which is how you control the camera. And so I got the one with the USB controller. If I were to rebuy it now, I would go for the Bluetooth controller, because then you're not wired. You know, you can take that controller away with you wherever your set is. Imagine it's got a certain range, but that would be nice to not be tied to the computer the way you are with the USB controller. But so this controller, you can play through all of your frames so far. You can take pictures here. You can go through your frames. You can cut parts out. You can delete frames. You can toggle between frames. You know, you can do all these different things just using this keypad. You can work with the Dragonframe program and not have the external keypad. It has a keypad like in the program, but it's certainly more convenient to have this little controller. And so I bought Dragonframe 3 and they gave me a free upgrade to Dragonframe 4, so that was nice. If you need to get the controller itself, they're $20, $35, something like that. Storyboard pads, I guess there's a storyboard function now in Dragonframe 4. And maybe this paper kind of lines up with it somehow. I'm not sure what this live view correction cap is about. I have to look that up. I know that the live view on my camera, my T2i, just sucks. I don't know if that's my camera specifically, because the T3i's don't seem to have that problem. So I don't know about that. I can still use the camera. I've made a film. The live view is just really awful quality, so it makes it a little bit harder to animate. You've got some motion control things here, which are probably out of anybody's price range. And then third-party motion control. So these are rigs that you can set up your camera on, and with each frame that you take, it'll make an incremental movement along the rig. So you've got a nice camera move. It's very complicated to do a camera move in stop motion, basically. It's difficult to do it without some kind of machine setup, basically. So yeah, so there's got to be... Yeah, so I know that somewhere there's the student version that you can get, and the student version is $100 cheaper than the full version. So you can also do a free trial, but so the student version is $100 cheaper. So you'd get it for $205 with the Bluetooth controller, and you get it for $195 with the USB controller. Some people would say that $195 is too much for a program. I mean, on the spectrum of prices for computer programs, $195 is not bad at all. I mean, if you're going for the Adobe Suite or TV Paint or something, you're talking at least $800. So Dragonframe is actually pretty cheap as far as programs go. But if you can't quite make that $195, I'm sure you could set up like a GoFundMe or something, and your family members could like each give $5, $10, something like that. You know, and just tell them that you want to make better films, you want to get into college, please give me $5 toward that goal. And I'm sure you could come up with $195 pretty fast. So that's an idea. Yeah, so downloads, so you can get it for Mac, Windows, Ubuntu I'm not familiar with, or Fedora, but okay. Free trial. Okay, it looks like with the free trial, the images you capture will have a watermark that cannot be removed. That's fun. License manager, additional resources, software. Yeah. Okay. Support. Oh, student sort. Here we go. There it is. So yeah. So Dragonframe 4 and the Bluetooth controller student is $205. Dragonframe 4 USB controller is $195. So that's nice. I think I actually got mine on Amazon anyway. But yeah, so that's the Dragonframe website. So there's pretty much everything you need. So these are some of the feature films that have been shot with Dragonframe. So you've got Isle of Dogs by Wes Anderson, The Little Prince that I mentioned, the Leica films Kubo and Missing Link, and Early Man, which is Aardman. Storyboard pads is the new thing that they're talking about. But anyway, yeah, so that's the Dragonframe website. I will do a separate tutorial just talking about how to get set up with Dragonframe and how everything works with that. But we'll talk about the other types of stop motion software. A lot of these are from the Make a Video Hub.com's best stop motion software from 2019. Monkey Jam they did not mention. Monkey Jam I've downloaded before, but I haven't actually worked with it. So I'll talk about that in a second. The first one they mentioned was Movavi Video Editor, which is free. But that's not actually a stop motion program. It's a video editing program that you can import images that you've already taken into the video editor and then set them, each image to last for a certain amount of time, and make an animation that way. You can add music, titles, and captions. And so you can kind of make an animation out of pictures you've already taken, but you can't actually capture the images themselves in that program. But it is free if that's the way that you want to do things. Adobe Flash Player needs to die. So Monkey Jam is free. Let me see my notes here. Monkey Jam is mainly for pencil tests. It can do some very basic stop motion stuff. Again, you're going to be importing images and exporting them as a movie. So I don't believe you have the ability to capture the images actually in the program itself. Okay, so for Windows PC, we've got Stop Motion Pro, which costs $185. At that point, you should really just buy Dragonframe. But Stop Motion Pro, let me see, Stop Motion Pro, you can work with high-res images. It's pretty easy to use. It can hook up to your webcam or a digital camera. You can actually take pics. You can take images in that program. So it has frame grabbing possibilities, which is what that's called, frame grabbing. You can work all the way up to 30 frames per second. You can record audio while the animation is playing back, and it also has lip sync support. So Stop Motion Pro is a decent, it has some capabilities. That's specifically for Windows PC though, and it's $185, which at that point I would really buy Dragonframe, but maybe you would prefer this for some reason. Q Stop Motion is also for Windows PC. That is free, and this website that I'm referencing said that Q Stop Motion is the best free program you can use. Again, you're importing images from your computer or off of your camera and exporting them as an animation, and you can export as an AVI file or an MPEG file. But in general, its capabilities and the interface is just very basic, which is a good thing for some people who are just starting out. You might want, something real basic. If you're working with a Linux system, you can use the program Heron, which is free, which you can actually, it has an onion skin, and you can work in different frame per second. You can work at different frame rates. So when you're talking about an animation, or any film, really, it's just a sequence of images that are played at a certain rate, and then it appears to be moving, basically. That's not a great way to explain it, but most films are 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, so that's 24 or 30 pictures per second that flash in front of your eyes. Some stop motion is 15 frames per second, and they're beginning to come out with movies now that are like 120 frames per second. My brain can't even handle what the heck that means. But yeah, so in this Heron program, you can work at different frame rates. You can shoot images and also export them as videos. So that's for Linux. Not many people work with Linux. For kids, for Windows PC, there's iKit Movie, which costs between $69 and $99. It's great for claymation. A lot of little kids like to work with Legos. Well, adults work with Legos too for stop motion. You can add in sound effects and music. They have some green screen capabilities, so that's fun, and it's very basic and very intuitive, I think, for kids. So that's a good option for kids. And then Stop Motion Studio is available for Windows, Mac, iPhone, iPad, and Android. It is free, but you can get more capabilities if you pay for the paid version. And then finally on Mac, we have iStop Motion, which costs, I thought it was free, but it costs about 20 bucks. And then you've got onion skin in there. You've got auto toggle, so it can toggle between your last frame and your current view. It can work for an iPhone or a Mac. You can also do some changes in there to hue, saturation, and color balance of your images. So yeah, so those are some of the other options for stop motion software. Again, I really suggest Dragonframe. That's what's used in the industry. So if you're looking to get into the industry, it's worthwhile to become familiar with the software that they use. Let's talk about stop motion equipment. Setting up for shooting stop motion. So you obviously need a computer. I'm assuming you already have one. You can use a PC or a Mac. I told you about some of those software programs that are available only for Mac or only for PC. So if you're planning to use one of those, make sure you have the corresponding computer. The Dragonframe software I just talked about, the student prices versus the full version. I'm not sure how you verify that you are a student, because sometimes with some programs, if you have a .edu website or a .edu email, then they'll say, okay, you're a student, great, you get to pay less. Other times, like for Amazon Prime, I had to get, I took a screenshot of some thing saying that I was officially registered for a class for the next semester, and that's how I verified my student status for Amazon. So I'm not sure how you have to verify that you're a student for Dragonframe, or if you can kind of just be like, trust me, I'm a student, whatever. So yeah, digital single lens reflex camera, DSLR. Usually Canon, like I said, you can get them, when I looked, you can get them as cheap as 60 bucks used. If you get a brand new fancy one, they can be as much as $5,000. Don't do that. Why? Buy yourself something much nicer with $5,000. So you need a camera, power cord, or battery pack. Again, I really recommend you get a power cord. Battery packs, once you get a camera on a tripod, it's hard to get the camera. You'd have to take the camera off the tripod to switch out the battery, and at that point you've moved the camera. So if you're in the middle of an animation and you put the camera back on, then you're never going to be lined up with where you were. It's a big hassle. So get one of the power cords, the adapter power cords. Those can be as cheap as 15 bucks. You'll need a tripod for your camera, unless you're really good at propping it up on books and stuff, which is not very, that's kind of scary, because then if you hit it, your camera goes flying somewhere. A tripod you can get for as cheap as 40 bucks and as much as like 100 bucks. Ideally, you want a really heavy, high quality tripod that's going to like stay put. But if you can only afford the real cheap one, then you can, that's what you can do. Optionally, I guess professionals will use sandbags to weigh down the tripod. You basically want to weigh down the tripod so that if you do hit it, it doesn't really go anywhere. But a hack is just to hot glue the tripod's feet to the floor, which is what I do more often, actually, than using sandbags. But yeah, and be aware of where you place your camera and where you're going to be animating, because sometimes, it can be hard to get a good shot and be able to get in there and still animate at the same time. So tripod and attaching the tripod to the floor. USB cable to attach the camera to the computer. This you probably already have. I had to get an extender because some USB cables are not actually that long. I had to get an extension cable for USB, and that was like $5 on Amazon. So, like I mentioned, it's best to use a Nikon camera lens with your Canon camera if possible. Canon causes that light flicker in the final image sequence, which you might not notice if you're not looking for it, but I don't know. If you can, go for a Nikon camera lens. I mean, they're going to be pretty much the same price as a Canon camera lens anyway. So, but DSLR lenses are available in focal lengths 18mm to 300mm. I'll do a video talking about cameras and lenses, so you'll understand what the heck that means. An 18mm basically is a wide lens, whereas a 300mm is a long lens, and they have different properties. They create different levels of blur and sharpness in an image. They might distort the image a little bit more or less in different ways. So they just have different qualities. And we'll talk about that. The most common lens to use for stop motion is the 35mm. You can do an entire film with a 35mm, and it's perfectly fine. You could use a 50mm also, but 35 is pretty much standard. So if you're starting out, get a camera and get a 35mm lens. The other focal lengths are ones that you might use for different effects or different like specialty shots. Also, in lieu of multiple lenses, you can use a single zoom lens, which adjusts. It can be 24mm, or it can adjust up to 200, or maybe it's 55 and it can adjust up to 300. Obviously, there are pros and cons of using a zoom lens. Yeah, but the lens that I've been using, standard must-have, is the 35mm, and those average about 150 to 300, something like that. If you get a really fancy one, maybe it's more expensive than that. But yeah, like I said, get a 35mm lens and the camera, and you're pretty much set, unless you want to do real fancy stuff. Specialty lenses, if you want to get them, are fisheye lenses. Tilt shift lenses are really cool. It's hard to explain, but they make a life-scale scene look like a miniature replica. So I'm going to have to talk about that in the lenses episode, because tilt shift is pretty awesome. But you wouldn't really use that for actually filming in stop motion, nor would you really use a fisheye lens. But those are just specialty lenses that exist in the universe. So if you're using a Nikon lens with the Canon camera, you need a converter to attach the Nikon lens to the Canon camera. And that, I got one for like 15 bucks. Not a big deal. So ideally you want to have some like professional lights, but I know plenty of people who have done like serious thesis student films with everyday around the house kind of lights. But if you do have the potential, if you have the money, and if you do have the availability to get some professional lights, that's always ideal. That's always better. So there's an overhead mounted softbox light. So that's your basic RE stage light, but it has like a fabric box around it. That creates like a really nice, it's like a softened light coming from above that can be very similar to like daylight, basically. And so a softbox light can be as cheap as like 20 bucks, which I don't know if you want to get a 20-buck one, or they can be like pretty expensive, like 150, something like that. These numbers here aren't necessarily accurate. And then theoretically you want to have 3-point lighting, so you could have 3 RE lights, usually around a 150. Is good. That's a smaller size. The bigger the number gets, the bigger the actual light itself gets. So it's ideal to have 3-point lighting with RE lights, but again, if you have household lights, make it work, you know. So, and then of course you'll need some extension cords and a lot of power outlets, that's for sure. So if you wanted to get started with stop motion and be kind of low-tech about it and start from scratch, you could get a tripod for 20 bucks, and you could get a camera, hopefully with a lens, for 60 to 100. And then you could use free software, and you probably already own a computer, a USB cable, and some household lights. So you could get started with stop motion from scratch with spending about 80 to 120 bucks, which is pretty good. It's not too bad. If you want to go all out, it would obviously cost a lot more than that. So yeah, so we talked about the kind of cameras that Dragonframe supports. I'm sure every new version of Dragonframe supports more and more cameras. So you can hook up to USB webcams too, which is great. So if you want to hook up to a webcam or iPhone or iPad, there are also opportunities there for that. All right, and that's pretty much the end of the resources that I'm going to talk about. So I'll have another video where I talk about Dragonframe, specifically how to use that. I'll talk about animation, what frame rate means, all that kind of stuff, terminology like what pixelation is, which is different from what you think it means. I'll talk about materials. There's all kinds of videos that I've got coming up. So good job making it through this one, which is like an hour long. But hopefully you know some more stuff now than you knew before. I don't know, maybe. I'm gonna go take a nap.